back, everyone. Thank you for coming along. We're pretty much 2/3 of the way through the course, and I really appreciate everyone still hanging in there. These Zoom courses are quite boring when you're the only person that attends and gives the presentation, so thank you very much for that. So we're in session 7, and today we're going to cover written feedback, which I'll be myself, then followed by Jeff Kello, who will give us a talk on literature and forgery. And then the final speaker for today is Ian McMahon for evaluation of the one-framers. So let's just get into it. Jury feedback to the exhibitors. Why do we give feedback to the exhibitor? Well, that's a rhetorical question because I'm going to answer it. So first of all, the exhibitor has spent a lot of time putting together their exhibit so they can show it at a show and get a medal level. They also pay a reasonable amount of money for that privilege so that we can judge it for them. So as an exhibitor, it's beholden to us to make sure that they get the most out of the time that they've spent putting it together and the money that they've paid to enter it. So we give 2 types of feedback to the exhibitor. If the exhibitor is at the show at the end, at the exhibition, then we will do in front of the frames feedback, one-on-one. If they're not there, we also do a written feedback, which we do for every exhibitor, and that it gets put in with their certificate, etc., for those that don't have time. We do recommend that if there's a commissioner involved who's brought an exhibit along to an exhibition, that they front up on behalf of the exhibitor and take some notes down as well. So we give feedback to every exhibitor that enters into an Australian show. So what is your role as judge regarding the feedback? Well, first of all, the main thing I want you to do is remember every time that you've had feedback from a judge yourself. Some of us have had good experience, some of us have had bad experience, and some of us have had both. And in the beginning, it's very difficult to give good feedback, but as you do it more and more, it becomes easier and easier, and you've got a better idea on what you need to do. So your responsibility is giving good feedback on every item that you judge. So let's start from the beginning. So preparing the feedback before judging. So if everything goes well and you've got a good team leader, you would have been asked to, here is the list of 13, 14 exhibits that the team's going to judge. And these are the exhibits that you are going to be the first responder on. First responder is a person that's going to take lead in the discussion when judging, and also will take lead in the feedback. The feedback's still done as a team, so this is important. If you know you're a first responder to an exhibit, then you need to do some homework, A, on judging the exhibit, and B, be prepared for what type of feedback you're going to give. All right, so the first thing you're going to do is you're going to receive a title page. And on the title page, while it's only draft, you get a feel for what this exhibit's going to present, what sort of treatment it's going to do. You've got an idea on how they're presenting the title page. You could start making some notes about the title page and probably a little bit about the treatment based on the title page. However, many exhibitors will redo their title page before they enter, after they've submitted the draft. So do not just use those comments for feedback. Please reread the new title page. So preparing feedback during judging. So as a team, you're going around, you're going to be marking treatment and presentation, research and knowledge, etc. And what we ask you to do is don't just write down the score that you've agreed on, but also any points that you've spoken about with treatment or research or knowledge and do it as point form, because you're not going to have time to write down lengthy sessions. So if the general comment on treatment was they put the title on every page, we don't think they should do that. So just title every page, something like that you can speak about. If the treatment wasn't balanced, then you could just put not balanced. just to prompt you to have some points to talk about on feedback. So some of the things you need to write down is what is really good about the exhibit, because I think we always need to start as a friendly discussion what we really liked and enjoyed about the exhibit. Then we start talking about what the exhibitor should change or should consider to change in order to improve the exhibit. I also will write down, if I've got an example of something I want to say, I will write down the frame and page number. Like you can see, 3 of 12. So that's frame 3, page 12. This particular cover is the rate description is fantastic, and all of them should be written like this. Something like that, just those general notes down. Now, preparing the feedback after judging, typically there is some downtime in the judging room. This is the time you should use to get your thoughts together about your written feedback and your verbal feedback. Take the opportunity to go back out in front of the frame, look at everything, start constructing larger sentences that you want to do. Also, I would like, if I see something in another exhibit that the exhibitor should look at as a consideration on how something's been done, how they've written it up, how they've formatted it, how they do their subtitles, or how they do their plan on the title page, and give them a visual cue on what to do. So I would find those and put notes on them as well. All right. Giving good feedback. That's the thing that everybody wants. They want to hear something. They don't want to be argumentative. They're looking to improve. So let's look at all advice that we give is both constructive and real reasons for real items or things to consider to improve the exhibit. I hate this, oh, your treatment's not good, you need to consider another treatment, without actually telling the exhibitor an example of what you mean, because they'll wander away saying, well, what's wrong with my treatment? He didn't give me examples. So if you're going to make a constructive thought also and suggestion, make sure you give adequate examples so they understand when they walk away what you mean. I always start the feedback with congratulating them on their medal. Congratulations on this large silver. That's a fantastic medal for the effort that you've put into here, and we hope that you want to move forward with it. The next thing is I will give them the breakdown, because that's the first time the exhibitor in front of the frames is going to know, they know what medal level they've got because there's a little ribbon on the frame saying they've got a gold or a vermeil, but they don't know the point breaks down. So at that point, I would start looking at saying, all right, you got 17 for presentation, 17 for treatment, you got 29 for research and knowledge, etc., etc. So, and allow them a bit of time to write it down themselves so they know what they're looking at. Then always mention the best aspects. We really enjoyed looking at it because the story you told was fantastic. We like particular items. It doesn't matter. You be genuine about the aspects that you like about the exhibit. Even if you think it's a horrible exhibit, there's always something that you can compliment the exhibitor on. Then start giving good advice on how to improve the exhibit. So, as I said before, remember that you're an exhibitor, and how would you like to be given the feedback? Do not talk about the exhibit. The exhibitor is the irrelevant part of the exhibit. It's all about the exhibit, how to improve on what you like. Always be specific on your suggestions. Don't say, I don't like the way you mounted your thing. That is not a constructive criticism. If you don't like matting, that's a bias that you have. I would not be talking to the exhibitor about that. However, if you feel there's some way that can improve, you can say, I would normally do, and you should consider it. There's nothing mandatory in a feedback session. Always be positive in every way with every item. Here's an example of what not to do. You're missing a lot of items. That's sort of the saying, look, you're an idiot for exhibiting. Why not change it to, why don't you consider you can make improvements to this exhibit by putting these items in and put it in the context of how you would normally describe. So rather than a negative, you're missing a lot of items, you need to go out and buy some more, always suggest something. Look, you could improve the strength of this exhibit by adding this item, that item, etc. So always look at the positive way. Now, a lot of us don't speak positive as a normal part of our speech. So it's something that you do need to practice and consider seriously. Here's a typical one that I get. Oh, you've screwed up on your rates description. Well, that's again telling the exhibitor that they're an idiot. Please don't do that. You can say, we've looked at frame 2, page 13. The description of Iceland is not quite correct. Put the word wrong there, but I'd even like to soften it. It should be 16 centile. Give a pause if you're going to talk about a few others where the rate description is wrong, so they can at least absorb what you're saying. Then we've also found other wrong rate descriptions in frame 3 at page 14 and frames 5 at 7. Give them a chance to absorb everything that you say. So you will not get good research and knowledge with poor rate descriptions. So please consider. I'm also going to recommend that you look at the available literature for rates, and please be very proactive in pointing them in the direction. Even as, Ian McMahon, he's in the Canberra Philatelic Society. He's really good at rates. Why don't you talk to him about this subject? Give a personal recommendation so the exhibitor knows where to go. All right, so this is a structure that you need to make it your own, but in essence, these items need to be when you're face to face. So you're going to have to introduce yourself. Hello, I'm Glenn. I'm the team leader. I've been judging this with my colleagues, John Moore and John Tobias, and we've really enjoyed, and congratulations on receiving a large silver for this exhibit. So basically, we want to take about 10 minutes and suggest that we talk about how the things we liked about the exhibit and how to improve. So I'm setting the expectations on how long I'm going to give the feedback. I've got 13 exhibits that my team needs to give feedback in 2 or 3 hours. If you don't tell them it's 10 minutes, if it's going to be 20 minutes or half an hour, half the exhibitors will not get a feedback, and that's not fair on them. So set the expectation early. Then tell them the breakdown points. Say, okay, you've got 17 for treatment. And as you go through the breakdown points, where they've done very well, compliment them. 19 for treatment. We really like the story you told. It was complete, etc., etc. Well done. However, your lowest point was research and knowledge. You've got 28, and these are the areas that you can look at. And you're 7 points down. If you can get 5 more points in this area, that's another medal level. I always talk about how to get 1 more medal level. Also ask them, do you have any questions? And when I'm finishing up, once again, I congratulate them and I thank them for exhibiting. I look forward to seeing it again at another exhibition, because you need to keep encouraging them to move, particularly at large silver. There's a lot of growth to go and exhibit. If it's a large gold, there's not a lot to talk about. You don't need to, you always congratulate them, but you don't need to say that you're going to see it at another exhibit. So that's just a structure that I follow. It's something that's quite simple. If you have it in the back of the mind, if you need to write it down, write it down, but just prepared and just follow that sequence and pace yourself as you're doing it. All right, the angry exhibitor. The one reason most people don't want to give feedback is because this guy is going to be angry at me. And to be honest, I've given a lot of face-to-face feedback, and I've only had probably 2 that I can remember where I felt like, oh, that was hard work. But always you're there because we want to help them improve their exhibit or congratulate them, etc. So always keep calm. Don't raise your voice. Don't try to win an argument. I'm not there to be told how to judge. And I'll explain, we can do that over a beer. But what I want to do in the next 10 minutes, I'll explain the points, acknowledge the good parts, and go through my whole process. If it's still argumentative, at some stage you're going to say, look, thank you very much. We're going to stop here. I need to go and give other feedback and then move on. But the majority of people are quite happy to have discussions in front of the frames. It's always the new people that want to have more and more because they want to take their silver bronze to large gold in 10 minutes. It's almost impossible, but please persist with those people as well. So written feedback. So you're required from the APF side at every national to give a written feedback. So not just in front of the frames, but a written feedback. So you will need to bring a laptop to the jury room so that you can type each of your feedback. This is now the new responsibility of a judge. If you don't have a laptop, you need to tee yourself up with someone that you can use one in the jury room. But understand, if you don't have it, you're often waiting second to use that laptop. So please consider. Also, typically, treatment, research and knowledge are areas to improve their medal levels without spending money. And I would implore you to work on those two areas when you're giving recommendations on improve. So here's one that I've just done recently at a state exhibition. It was Pacobo Mail. It was a large silver. This person needed quite a bit of encouragement. And because I believe in this person, I'm moving forward. So you can see that title page definitely needed improvement. And so each of the things that are mandatory on most title pages is something you can clearly come up and talk about. The title of the exhibit, the purpose statement, the scope of the exhibit, the structured plan, the personal research, the literature, and some rarities. So they're non-negotiable. It should be on each of the title pages. So that's one area you can concentrate before you even get to judging, because you get their title page in the beginning. Also, look at how to improve their treatment. Treatment's often in the beginning is the hardest thing to get your head around. So I always talk about from the title page, how do you do logical sections, how to do page headings, description. These are all common in good treatment. Then I have some additional things, particularly, and in this case, I thought I would come up with a draft example. I don't expect everyone to do an example of a title page, but I just quickly point out this is what you should consider. And again, thanks. So this is the way that I would do written feedback. This is from a colleague of mine that we were judging at state, and he just concentrated on the title page, the treatment, the knowledge, the rarity, and presentation, all in one page. It doesn't need to be 2 or 3 pages like I've done, but it covers that same sort of area. So 2 of the things I think when it comes to written feedback, have a word copy of the rules on your laptop. So you can refer to, okay, what do I need to say about treatment? You go back to the rules. It clearly defines how treatment should be treated. And even if you have to, cut and paste some of those and bring them across in your paragraph. And the second thing is, please get a laptop and bring it to the jury room. You definitely need that. So that pretty much concludes the feedback, both written and in front of the frames. It's a good time if you'd like to ask questions before I introduce the next speaker. So is there any questions? So everyone's ready to do feedback in front of the frames?
I've got one question, please.
Yes, sure, Denise.
Once you've done your feedback, you have copies of these feedback forms on your laptop.
Yeah.
Can you keep them forever and refer back to them, or that's a good what are you supposed to do with your electronic copies?
I keep them and just put them in a folder, because if I judge the same thing again, I'll just look back to what I've suggested. If they've done everything that I've suggested, then I'm going to congratulate them on that. If they've done none of the things, then I'm going to save myself a lot of time and just recommend the same things again. So it's more of it's getting skillful at giving feedback and written feedback. And also, I'm not a good typist and I don't like retyping. the same thing over and over again. So I'm a cut and paste sort of guy. But when you're doing that, please reread it before you print it out, so you haven't left somebody else's name in the feedback, etc. So there's a few catches about cutting and pasting.
Yeah. So you're allowed to keep other people's feedback forms on your personal laptop.
Well, they're your feedback to that exhibitor. So they're your words and your recommendation. And the reason I keep them also is sometimes I get a phone call 3 months later saying, you said, and I don't know where I can find it. And I'm thinking, what did I say? So I can also go back to their feedback form and have a look at what I said to them. So that helps as well.
Mm-hmm. And the title pages that you're given as well, are you allowed to keep those?
I keep every title page. I've been collecting title pages since 2009. And I've probably got about 500 examples of bad title pages and about 20 examples of good title pages. And these are international level title pages. So even at international level, and hopefully Jeff can back me up in the end, there's some woeful title pages. And that's one thing that we can always improve our local exhibitors on. Get that title page right. You know, even gold exhibitors don't put the mandatory items on the title page.
And so can you then use those title pages like in a session like this to show other people what to do or not to do, or is that?
As long as you take their name off it, but their name's not normally on a title page, so I think that's fine for me. We do title page workshops, and I will show good title pages and bad. The bad ones are generally mine, and the good ones are the ones that I've discovered and I can talk about. So,
okay, thank you.
So Denise, remember your first job is to give the completed feedback forms, depending on whether you're a team leader or a member of a team. They come back through the team leader to the secretary of the jury. And the secretary of the jury will then print them off, and they'll go back with the other information in Australia, the results sheet with all the marks on it, to the exhibitor with when they get their exhibit back. It's useful at that point for you to have a copy of those so that you can actually, it will help you talk to the exhibitor at the frames. And there is a question on the chat line which asks whether there's a printer to print out the feedback. Certainly the secretary has one to print them off as I described. And provided that there is time when the secretary is working, there may be able to be a copy printed for you as well.
And if you don't get a printed copy, you've still got your notes and your score sheet. So at least don't throw that out until the end of the exhibition.
And certainly not until after the feedback session, because you'll need to refer to it.
Agreed.
Then there were two things, one of which is the One Up Club, which is a tick box, which I thought perhaps I'd like covered so that everyone knows it's an opportunity. And the second thing is just I've had lots of feedback on exhibits. That is an extraordinary large feedback form that you showed us as an example of one that you gave. Is that what you consider normal, or is it one
that's normal for me for a large silver feedback? If it's a gold, they get one paragraph. What a great exhibit, fantastic. Found that your treatment was a little bit lacking, but everything else was great. Done. I mean, what more do you want to say on a large gold or a gold? Unless you've got something particularly you found that they've made a mistake on, then I would put that in the feed. But when it comes to silvers, large silvers, even for maize, these are the guys that need the most amount of help. So if they've screwed it up totally, if you've given them 11 for treatment, it's up to you to give a really good feedback on treatment. If you've given them 22 for research and knowledge, you really need to tell them, And also, if you've given them 5 for presentation, don't spend a paragraph on all the white spaces they left and their typos, because you've just told them they've got the best presentation in the world. So be careful on what you feedback on, because it's got to reflect on the marks that you've given them. The One Up Club. Do you want to just mention that, Steph, while we're...
It's just something that we implemented in Australia, which is a little tick box on the feedback form, which says that if you think the exhibit could benefit from having a more detailed evaluation by a judge, and so that they can really get a one up, an extra level, you can tick that as a recommendation, and it's up to the exhibitor, but it recommends to them that they can hand it in and send off a scanned copy of that exhibit to a judge to get real detailed feedback on their exhibit. And that really can be very useful if there's a lot of things that you think they could improve on. And hopefully that's a good thing.
Yeah.
Does that make sense?
Yeah. And I think we've had some successful cases where people have started and done the One Up Club and really have improved.
Absolutely. But I think it's something that we need to encourage the jurors to remember. It's something that they tend to forget.
All right. So we got to hit up the secretary and chairs on each shows to be promoted.
I'm here to talk about one frame exhibiting. And well, it's only one frame. It must be easy, mustn't it?
Yeah.
So the aim of what I want to go through very quickly are the aims, the principles, the rules, and the criteria. At FIP level and predominantly at national level, the aim is to present a narrow subject that fits in one frame. And as I said, that's very easy, except when you actually come out to do it, finding a subject that has sufficient depth, sufficient material that is only one frame in almost any discipline is quite a difficult thing to do. And we'll just spend a little bit of time talking about that a little bit later on. So you're picking a subject area that's very limited in scope. You've got limited material available. At the local level, at club level, and where states still have state level exhibitions, they may choose to do one frame exhibits as a way of providing an easy way for exhibitors to get into exhibiting without reference to what the case is at FIP exhibitions. And we'll come back to that a little bit later as well. So the principles of one frame exhibits are then that all aspects of the subject should be treated in the exhibit. So if it's a traditional exhibit, you might be choosing one stamp, preferably one that doesn't have too many different printings, but in that one frame, you'll have your essays and your proofs. You'll have perhaps different watermark varieties of that stamp and different perforations and relevant blocks, but also usage and everything else. And the subject effectively is as complete as you can get it based on the material that you can find, but it fits in one frame. If it's not intended that you would say, well, I've got an 8-frame exhibit of Canada stationery, so I'm going to choose the first frame and put that in as my one frame entry. Generally, that won't work. There may be cases where your one frame is about one particular stamp and it might work. If you do it, then obviously you would need a more focused title and you'd need a modified plan and treatment. But certainly also you can't take an exhibit and just show the very best items, what might be cherry picking. The one frame exhibit must stand on its own and not be a potential 2 or 3 or 5 or 8 frame exhibit. So it's not just a matter of filling the one frame with whatever you've got, but a good one framer will contain basically everything there is on that particular subject without any padding and not be able to be extended to 2 frames or more. And so what is a good one frame topic? Well, in postal stationery, 2 exhibits that have been quite good are the New Zealand prisoner of war air letters. Depending on how you think about it, there are sort of 12 different varieties. And so you could have a page for each with mint and used. and then room for a few errors and a few other things. And a number of people have tried it. I won't comment on who I think was the most successful. The difficulty of it is that in order to make it stand out as a one-frame exhibit, there are a few crucial items of which there's sort of one or two possibly none. So you have to have those to, to get the best possible one-frame exhibit. The military envelopes on the right have been done as a one-frame exhibit, and the Great Barrier Island in New Zealand pigeongrams have been done as a one-frame exhibit. I had the fortune in 2022 of going to an exhibition that was entirely one-frame exhibits, although it also had a literature class, but in terms of exhibits, they were all one-framers. It was an American continental show with FIP recognition, so it was at the international level. And what that is, you may not be able to read it properly, but hopefully you can. It's the list of the best in class and the titles of the exhibits, and doing it partly to prove that it is possible in every class to come up with a subject that's very narrow and suitable for one frame. It's not necessarily easy, especially thematics and open and picture postcards, and but the traditional exhibit was called the first coil stamp of the world. So in other words, it's about one stamp, and that's the subject. Postal history best in class was the male roots of Rupert's Land. Now, Rupert's Land, which existed up to about 1870, was controlled by the Hudson's Bay Company. They had a royal charter, and depending on what period you talked about, it covered much of the area around Hudson Bay across the top of Canada. So a very narrow area for a very narrow period. There's probably not a lot of mail existing from perhaps the 1840s to the 1870s or 1830s. The postal stationery is about one particular envelope, the 30-cent Nesbitt from the United States. As mentioned, the arrow was the pigeon mail of Great Barrier Island from Damien Lager from Germany, who's well known for multi-frame exhibits of ornithology. His one-framer was the Maori pigeon, a seriously endangered gardener in the forests of New Zealand. So he's picked one bird instead of all of the birds. He's chosen just to do one bird in a one-frame thematic. I don't quite remember exactly what From Postcards to Early Pictorials was in Maximaphilie, so I won't comment on it. And so it goes on. If you look at the titles, and if you get the chance, the Palmares for the Capex is still on the web, and it's at the web link that was in the previous slide. And it's just worth looking. If you're looking for a topic and for inspiration, have a look at what other people have done. So one-frame exhibits can come from any FIP competitive class except literature, and in Australia, any APF national class as well. They'll be classified and judged in their respected FIP class by the teams responsible at FIP level. In Australia, we have one-frame national exhibitions with a more limited judging team. But when you are judging one-framers, the point is that they are judged in accordance with the rules of their class, whether that be Aero, Postal Stationery, Cinderella's, First Aid covers. Now, I could go through all of the rules of each class, but I think you've done that already, so I won't. Otherwise, we might be here to midnight. So while you've got guidelines for one-frame exhibitions, for exhibits, they have to be read in conjunction with the SREBs and the guidelines. And as you'll see in a minute, the point scoring is slightly different, but still you can relate to it. The exhibits must be of a subject suitable for one frame and should not be one frame for a multi. We've talked about that. And at FIP level, they talk about penalties for exhibits from a topic which could be more than one frame. And most of the rest of this talk, I think, will be about that subject. So there are two groups of points for different classes. The first covers all classes except for thematics and open and in Australia topical. I'll just minimize that. Get out of the way. The first one is treatment and appropriateness of subject, which is 30 points. And just to run through the others, you've seen them all before. Philatelic knowledge, personal study and research at 35, condition and rarity at 30, presentation at 5. So philatelic knowledge, personal study, research, condition and rarity and presentation means the same as it does in the class of the exhibit that you'll be judging. Treatment means the same. So the difference is the appropriateness of the subject, and there's no importance. So that makes a difference when you're judging. And similarly for thematics and in Australia topical, does anyone know where does open stand with the other classes? Do you know, Glenn?
I think it does.
I think it does, yes.
Yeah.
I assume then an open knowledge includes both philatelic and
split
subject knowledge for the open.
They're intending to split it into the two, 15, and I think it's 20 and 10.
Yeah, but anyway, in the FIP rules at the moment, it's not split.
No, it's the same as the class at the moment. So,
yeah.
Yeah.
So thematics and the Australian topical class, the only difference really is it's got 35 points for treatment and appropriateness of subject, and then 30 for knowledge, etc. We're just saying that it's going to be judged in the same way as the other classes. So we come to appropriateness and what that means. At the FIP level, there's a penalty, if you like to call it that. It's not separate. It's part of the marking for the treatment and appropriateness subject. So you mark effectively the appropriateness. And what it's saying is that if you say that 5 points for the treatment and appropriateness, then if it fits the one frame beautifully, you get 5 points. If it might be 2 or 3 frames, then you might lose a point under the treatment and appropriateness. But if it was 5 or 8 frames, then you could lose up to 5 points. So if you just took an 8-frame exhibit and you cherry-picked some nice pieces out of it and it didn't make sense as a one-framer, then you'll find yourself losing the 5 points in treatment. In Australia, we do things similarly but differently. And while generally speaking, Australia uses FIP rules for all classes, there are a number of occasions when at national level, the APF has modified the FIP rules. We were talking about one of them last time in regard to youth being allowed to get gold medals, which is different to the FIP rules. And another example of this difference is with one-frame rules. So Australia, in a sense, is trying to both fulfill the need for one-frame exhibits to be good one-frame subjects and to be suitable for showing overseas. And on the other hand, it doesn't want to discourage newer exhibitors coming in trying to do one-frame who are not going to compete at the international level. You need 75 points to be accepted as a one-frame exhibit at an international show, whether it be FIP or FIAP. And therefore, if you score and the judges go through and you're scoring 75 points or more, and then they look at the appropriateness and decide that this should really be an 8-frame exhibit, then you will lose up to 5 points, but not necessarily. It may only be 1 point. But if you're not at that cusp of 75 points, then you won't be penalised in that way. So where the exhibit scores 74 points or less, this will not be applied. And the APF rules explicitly state, well, that it's up to 5 points, it's not 5 points. If you thought it could be an 8-frame exhibit, you did birds of the world instead of just one bird, then that's clearly an 8-frame exhibit. You might lose 5 points. But if you've only chosen 2 species and it would be 2 frames, then you might only lose 1 or 2 points. Probably the most important thing here to say to judges is that when you're providing feedback on 1-frame exhibits, you must include a statement of that an exhibit does not meet the 1-frame appropriateness, if that is the case. So if people have lost points, they should be told that. They should be told that in the judge's view that this subject is too wide for a 1-frame exhibit. But even if they've scored less than 75 points, it's very important that that be said, that this is not suitable for a 1-frame exhibit, but we hope to see your multi-frame exhibit on Birds of the World shortly. But it's up to the judges to do that, and it needs to happen. As I mentioned, most 1-frame exhibits these days are shown in special exhibitions, and they've been held in regional centres. The next national 1-frame exhibition is in Toowoomba in October, and I'm sure you'll all be up there looking at the 1-frame exhibits and seeing how you would judge it, even though you might not be on the jury. The other part of the national rules which differ from FIP is that in our 1-frame exhibitions, we allowed youth exhibits. And generally, they're judged the same way as youth exhibits would be, and it's based on the age and the point distribution. So that's the age distribution. So up to 15. Slightly different from FIP, who think have a minimum, and then 19 to 21. And then there's different rules for thematic and topical, and so you've got the rules for all classes and the rules for thematic and topical. That's essentially all I was really wanting to say about 1-frame exhibits. I just had a slide which I gave in a previous talk on 1-pages on the title page for 1-frame exhibit. Essentially, they're the same as the case with multi-frame, but you've got less landscape, if you like, to exhibit on. So the 1-frame title page perhaps needs to be a bit tighter and more carefully thought out. One thing I found in CAPEX, traditionally Australian judges have often said that if you put an item on the front page, it doesn't count. At CAPEX, the American Influence International jury was suggesting that it did count and that it shouldn't be duplicated with anything else in the exhibit, and that it should actually be a valid item that was part of the exhibit. But I'm not quite sure where we stand on that at the moment. So I think, Glenn, that was what I was going to say.
I think you've covered it excellently there. Yeah, on the item on the title page, I think Jeff Long's very strong that there's nothing written, so therefore it is accepted. But now you're saying the Americans saying if it's duplication, so I think we do need to get clarification from FIP.
Well, I think although it was a FIP recognised jury, it was a FIAF, the American Continental Federation. But that allowed, under their rules, a lot of US and Canadian national judges. So I think I was hesitating in saying it mainly because you do get these differences between countries, even between Australia and New Zealand, but particularly with the US. And I'm not quite sure what the FIP view on that.
I was always under the impression, both at FIP and in Australia, and again, this can be equally wrong, but that what was true for a multi-frame, which was that the first frame you were allowed to have something that wasn't applicable, was not true in a 1-frame, and that in fact the item on the first frame counted in 1 frame in all cases, namely because it's only 16 pages.
I'm not sure if it says that anywhere in the rules. But that was the difference interpretation that the CAPEX jury was making. Yeah. And it was reasonable in one framers.
Yeah. It's the advice I've always given people I've been tutoring. So I'd like to know that's right.
Well, it comes back oftentimes. You go back to the rules and you see what is in there. And if it doesn't say anything, then this is just something judges have adopted over time on their own. So.
I think it's sometimes an item that's not really philatelic in a multi-frame that's allowed on, something cute and exciting.
I think that might still be the case, but I'm not sure there's a rule that says that.
Yeah, and sometimes people put a precursor of their subject on the title page because it really isn't part of the story other than it was before the story. So, all right, just give me a moment and I'll share. Sorry, if there's any other questions, please let me know. If not, I'll start sharing. Okay. All right, so I'll introduce Jeff Kellows. He's well known by most of the people, and he's the reason I'm a judge because he didn't fail me as an apprentice. So therefore, I kept moving forward. So he's got a lot to live up to. So Jeff, just let me know when you want me to change slides.
I will. Thank you. And hello to everybody. So philatelic literature. You will all realise that this exhibiting class is very different to all the others. Often someone has entered a book that's the result of years of research and study, and to all intents and purposes, it can't be improved. You can't give feedback and tell them to enter a new edition next year. So to some extent, the literature class is an opportunity for authors to expose their works to a wider audience, because the literature, as you know, is on show at the exhibition for anyone to inspect. So moving on, next slide, please. So the categories of philatelic literature. There are monographs, which can be handbooks and studies of any sort, priced stamp catalogues, documentation of collections, by which is meant a reproduction of somebody's collection, and also specialised auction catalogues can also be entered. The next basic class is periodicals and journals, and normally you enter 1 year's worth of issues to be submitted for the judging. Thirdly, digital media, which is websites or monographs published only in electronic form. The Literature Commission's had a fair bit of trouble over the years at trying to define digital media and exactly how to judge digital media, but they now have a set of guidelines. I won't deal with them much. There are still relatively few digital entries at either national or international level. It's normal that all the works to be entered have to have been published in the 2 years prior to the date of the exhibition. Because of COVID, we have slightly relaxed that here, such that I think even the Canberra exhibition might have 1 or 2 works that are a little older, but basically they have to be published within the last 2 years, and all the entries you are required to provide 2 copies of each entry. Next. So monographs. They will vary from a 500-page book on a single stamp issue to something rather smaller, the postal history of the travelling post office, to something much more modest, which in this case is what the postmarks and post offices of Guyana. There are more and more self-published works being published now than ever before. Next. Periodicals, they may be normal commercial periodical, as you see on the left. The journal of a study group or special society, or newsletters of a stamp club or society. Next. So, judging. This is the breakdown of the points. There are 4 categories. Treatment of contents, 40. Originality, significance, and depth of research, 40. Technical matters, 15. And presentation, 5. and we will deal with these each in order. Next. So treatment of contents. Basically, this is looking at the literary style of the author. Is his style fluent and easy to read? Does he provide some acknowledgement and discussion of the previous publications on the same subject? Is all the arrangement of the work logical? Has he broken it into chapters that make sense? Has he used illustrations and tables where it's useful for those to be present? So it's all about the skill in the communication, his writing style, and has that succeeded in giving the reader a easy knowledge of the subject of the book. Next, originality and significance and depth of research. So first, there's the overall significance. How important is the book or the periodical in terms of world philately, and how important is it on its specific subject matter? So for instance, original research, is the work completely new, an extension of our current knowledge on the subject, or really just a rehash of the existing information? How comprehensive is it? The depth and scope of the work, has it been exhaustively treated, or is it more introductory in nature? And then the author's understanding of the subject, the degree to which, in terms of his research and analysis, has he demonstrated a comprehensive understanding of the subject? So this clearly is, these 40 points is where a lot of the points are gained, and it is very much biased towards clearly research. And that does disadvantage certain books, as we'll talk about in a little while, but I think most can agree that the major purpose of philatelic literature is to publish new research. Moving on. Now, the technical matters, these are basically the editorial aspects of a book. Does the title page have the date and publication and an ISBN number? Is the book got page numbers? I think there's nothing worse than a book without page numbers. There's no excuse not to have page numbers in your book. Has it got a table of contents and an index? Sometimes you perhaps don't need an index, but there certainly should be a table of contents normally. Are the acknowledgements and bibliography suitably presented and exhaustive? The illustrations and tables, are the actual presentation of these illustrations and tables at a high level? Are they easy to use? Can you see what you're supposed to see in the illustration? There's no point having the illustration there if you can't see what he's talking about. Tables, you can make tables extremely complex, but that doesn't help sometimes. Does a table explain what it's trying to tell you? There's a use of footnotes, and it's a general consistency of style throughout the work. Is it from page 1 to page 100? Does it basically flow logically all along the way? I'd also mention that sorry, that's technical matters. I'll go on to presentation first before I mention what I'm going to mention. Next. So presentation is only 5 points. This is, and as I say right down the bottom, it's not intended that entries be penalised because they are not hard bound in leather and full of colour illustrations and all sorts of things, and with a dust jacket and a slipcase and everything else. The points are basically awarded consistent with the production costs. So binding is perhaps the most important one. None of us like a book that as soon as you open it, it falls apart. There's no excuse for that. The clarity of the print, there's also no excuse for that. Page size, paper quality, table of contents and index, and the use of the colourful illustrations. So as I said before, there are more and more books being self-published by authors, and that's great, but it's not an excuse not to get the presentation of the book in good order. everybody. One of the problems is all of us have laptops and think we're whiz bang on computer and putting a book together and everything else. And you can get carried away, as you can get carried away in a normal stamp exhibit and have all sorts of frills and flourishes and 24 colours on every page or something. The same applies to philatelic literature. You can overdo what you're able to do with a computer. You have to make the book easily usable. So that's the basic marking. Historically, philatelic literature has rarely received very high marks. Going back a decade, you never heard of a book receiving a large gold medal at international exhibitions. It's now beginning to happen, and I think that's a good thing. I think for some reason or other, the general consensus on judging literature in the early 2000s and earlier was that you can't let these things get the same marks as the great stamp exhibits. But now they're saying, if this book's that good, why shouldn't it? And in fact, there has been at least one instance that I remember of a book that won a large gold medal being nominated for the Grand Prix. Next page. These are just two little things I thought I would mention. As I said at the beginning, auction catalogues can be and have been entered into literature exhibits, as have people's reproductions of their exhibits. But these will nearly always suffer when it comes to originality and research. I mean, there have been instances where someone's shown their large gold exhibit in the frames and then they've produced a copy of the book and thought that that might get a large gold as well. In fact, that's what you write the book for, not just scan all your pages and stick them in a book. So even though there may be original research on your album pages that is reproduced into the book, it's still not presenting that original research in a particularly good manner. You should be writing your book, not just saying that here's the book of all my research. Next page. On a few mentions about periodicals. Periodicals suffer even worse. As I say there, you rarely see a periodical win a medal level above Vermeer. One reason is, of course, that much of the quality of the journal is dependent on the editor, who can have a difficult task with submissions from a range of authors on various subjects, written in various styles. So the specialised society and study circle journals have a distinct advantage because they will have a large proportion of research articles. So they will score very well in originality and research. The general commercial journals contain a wide variety of articles and many general in nature. And then when you get down to the club or society newsletter, or federation journal, which is basically talking about the internal activities of their organisations, with a few general articles, a bunch of illustrations of meetings or whatever, it will perform poorly under originality and research. So I think you can see where it's going to be very difficult for periodicals to gain really high medal levels. Next. That's the end, sorry. Any questions before we move on to forgeries?
Hi, Jeff. Could you please talk about something, the digital media literature class? Something.
The digital. You mean the digital media
catalog? Yeah, digital catalog and website.
Yeah, as I actually didn't. I decided I wouldn't deal with that. Yeah, they are basically judged under the same criteria, with a few minor changes in terms of what an online website or an online catalogue presents. So it particularly you have to take into consideration the ease of navigation of the website, links, within the website to go where you want to go and all this sort of thing. So it is basically done on the same criteria, but there are a few extra additional considerations which are in the literature guidelines on the FIP website.
Yeah, the last year the exhibition New Zealand National Literature Exhibition 2023. Luckily, I won Barmel for my website, and I'm just wondering, can I put that website for Uruguay World Stamp Exhibition, because I can see I can apply for that the Uruguay International Stamp. I think this is the FIP.
Yeah, no, you're right. I didn't mention that, but there are no qualifying standards to enter an international in literature. So you have no problem entering.
Okay, because in most cases it says Barmel.
Yeah, no, that doesn't apply. That does not apply to literature. You don't even have to go through a national exhibition, in fact, really.
Okay, so thank you. I'm going to put on application for Uruguay literature class. I can try second try. First one was successful. Let's see how it goes with the second try. Thank you.
Okay. Anything else? We'll go on to forgeries.
Yeah, Jeff, you mentioned importance, and is it the same levels as in other classes? Like you mentioned world importance. So is it the importance of the subject matter to world philately or to country, then to moving down the sliding scale?
Similar. It's judged similarly to a stamp exhibit. Yes. How important is this in world philately, in the country, and how important is that book in terms of other books that have been done on the same subject?
Right. No, thank you.
We'll move on to the forgery. Forgeries is not a class. I think I've been asked to talk about forgeries to talk about the expert team. I presume that was the case.
Yeah, that's correct. Thanks, Jim.
Let me just get to where I am. Right. So there is no expert teams don't operate at the national level in Australia, or as far as I know, anywhere else. But they do operate at the regional and FIP exhibitions. And so what I want to give you here quickly, because I've really reduced this down from a much larger presentation, because many of you won't know, is the function of the expert team and the way the expert team operates at an FIP exhibition. So next slide. So the expert team's role is to check exhibits for any forged or otherwise dubious items, verify the existence of authentication certificates, and to recommend appropriate actions in cases where forgeries and fakes might be found. Now, I want to emphasise that the aim is not to catch people out and say, I gotcha. It is only rarely that there is ever a problem. Exhibitors get worried as soon as something's been pulled out of their exhibit to look at that they're going to be in trouble and they're going to lose marks. You don't lose a mark for showing an item that turns out to be forged. You're just told to take appropriate action. So I want to emphasise that they're not there to get you. Next. So the expert team, there's usually 3 or 4 members with a team leader, and preferably with a specialised knowledge in different areas, selected by the exhibition management and subject to ratification by the FIP board. That's all very straightforward, like any other jury. Next. So the exhibition is meant to, has to provide you, the expert team, with equipment, which is a computer scanner and a printer, and a thumb drive to transfer records to the FIP Secretariat. They also are needed that you were also provided with a room which may or may not be in the jury room, but is enclosed off the jury room, so that they can work in private. In practice, all you need now actually is a scanner, and most expert teams will bring their own computer because they know how to use that and don't have to learn how to use anything else there. So as long as the scanner's there and a printer's there, then it's easy going. Next. So first first things happened before the 2 months before the exhibition. Amongst all the once all the entries have been accepted for the exhibition, then the FIP Secretariat will go through all the exhibits and find those exhibits which on their previous showing have been asked to do something about an item that was shown in the exhibition by the previous expert team. So they find all those and they put all the paperwork together. I got a scan of the item in question, and it's sent to the expert team leader by email. Next slide. And the team leader emails the relevant national commissioners and attaches that paperwork for their exhibitors and asks them to contact those exhibitors to determine whether A, a certificate has been acquired for the item, in which case it needs to be forwarded to the team leader so it can be forwarded to the expert team. It needs to be forwarded to the team leader. Or that any item that has been asked not to be shown again has been removed from the exhibit. Now, this is all done just to save time when you get to the exhibition, because this can all be done beforehand and we don't have to worry about it when we get there. So next next slide. Once you get to the exhibition, the FIP requires you to check all exhibits in the championship class for any questionable items. Then the expert team will just examine exhibits at random, but they'll most likely concentrate on the areas they know more about. As many items as possible are identified, although there's an upper limit depending on the time available to do all the work. The other jury teams are also asked to keep their eyes open as they're judging and to fill out any forms and hand them to the expert team for consideration as well. Next. So that form has to be completed. A form is completed for each item, and the form has various boxes so you can identify exactly which item within an exhibit is in question, and also indicates the reason why a doubt has been raised about that item. Next. So once all the forms are together, then the expert team has the job of getting these the sheets with the relevant items out of the frame. And so the exhibition committee has to organise 1 or 2 teams to unlock the frames. It's important that the national commissioner supervises the removal of the sheet, and then the insertion of a sheet simply saying that this sheet has been removed and indicating the reason why it's been removed. It can be rather difficult on occasions to get all the national commissioners there, but we usually manage it. Next. So each sheet that's been removed is then scanned, and 3 colour copies are printed with the item under question indicated on those sheets. 2 additional copies of the evaluation form are photocopied, and that it needs all to be collated. In other words, all the paperwork is done in triplicate. Next. Then the expert team will sit down as a group, consider each of the items in question and determine what their recommendation will be. And this is generally one of 3 types. Next, of which I got 4. Isn't that good? Firstly, and best of all, I guess, is no actions required. The item is found to be perfectly good. Second, that the item is not to be shown again. In those cases, a member or all the members of the expert team are sure that the item is a forgery or a fake in some way and will not get a good certificate, and so they indicate that it will not be shown again. Thirdly, and the most common thing that will be recommended, is that a certificate is required if the item will be shown again in future exhibitions. And lastly, and this is becoming more and more common to some extent, is that sometimes exhibitors' description of items on their sheets need to be improved or clarified. They're either misrepresenting in some way what the item actually is. Next page. I left out thing here, but you've got to get the sheets back into the frames. And that used to be hard work. These days we cheat. We simply give them all back to the National Commissioners and give them the job to get them back in the frames. So we have the 3 sets of paperwork that have been removed, and these are distributed as follows. 1 to the FIP or FIAP or whoever, Secretariat for their records. The other 2 go to the National Commissioner, once for their National Federation and 1 to return to the exhibitor. And next, an expert team report is prepared and read to the jury during its final session and is later published in the Palmares. And it outlines how many items have been looked at and what conclusions were drawn on all those items. That is, how many were not to be shown again, how many need certificates, how many were okay. Now, as I've mentioned earlier, we're not there to penalise the exhibitor. And anyone who's been told to remove an item because it's considered forged or faked does not receive any penalty for that. They're simply told, don't show it again. There are very occasionally penalties are unusual and typically involve the exhibitor showing an item that he's previously been asked not to remove, or that he has such an excess of forgeries and fakes that it's considered that action should be taken. The usual penalty for that is 5 points. In other words, the exhibitor is downgraded 1 medal level. And that's really a very quick outline of the work of the expert team. I'll answer any questions you have.
Thanks very much.
Jeff, an expert team wouldn't be called for every exhibition, would it, or only in cases or?
Every FIP exhibition and every regional FIAP. FIPA exhibition is required by the FIP to have an expert team do the job I've just outlined.
Jeff, it seems to me to be a bit, and I don't know how you get around this, and I understand cost-wise, we couldn't afford to have an expert team in our national exhibitions because, we're running tight on money, but there are dubious items in a national exhibition which end up going to an international exhibition and then end up being called out. So how do you think we should handle an item that inside a national exhibition that we think or someone on the jury thinks is dubious?
Well, I think you can do the same thing. I think if the jury team judging that exhibit thinks that he'll have a problem if he goes international, then I think he should probably be recommended to get a certificate. I don't see any problem with that being written on the critique sheet.
Yeah. And I think we should put that to them in front of the feedback, because if this is going international, we do have some issues with this. It may be genuine, but be prepared for it to be scrutinised by the expert group. And if they've got time to get a certificate, I think that makes sense for us to prompt people. And I think once you've judged a bit, you start to see what the expert group are looking for. And I think sometimes I'm finding, particularly in traditional, people are misdescribing proofs and essays, etc., etc. And I think we need to fix that up before it goes international.
That was one of the things I mentioned was the misdescription of items, and that's the most common misdescription is misdescribing proofs more than anything else. The other thing that is becoming rife at the moment is a lot of modern designers' archives are coming onto the marketplace, and thematic collectors especially love to have a few artist drawings or artist sketches and things. They are almost impossible to prove the provenance of, and I don't know how that's going to be dealt with in the future. I think it's a very difficult problem as to whether some pencil sketch of a stamp is genuine or not.
Mm.
What about an email attachment?
Mm.
Your proofs come these days as email attachments. So you print them out, but how do you prove it?
Yeah. Yes, exactly. Yeah, I think that could be a problem in the future in many ways, but I don't know how we'll get around it. Some of them you will know that are okay, but I worry that it will become more of a problem in the future.
So, Jeff, I've been through that process. I've had several sheets taken out. It is actually a painless procedure and nothing to worry about.
Yeah, no, exhibitors get very uptight if they're at the exhibition and find that one of their pages is missing and got a thing there saying this page has been removed, temporarily removed.
And they think at that point they're going to lose 2 or 3 medal levels, and you have to reassure people.
That's what I'm trying to emphasise is that it is highly improbable you'd never lose a mark. You virtually never lose a mark. Now, the only instance of all the times I've been on an expert team, only once have we delivered a jury report in which we've recommended someone lose 5 points.
Yeah. I would say that there was one exhibit at a Canberra exhibition.
That was disqualified. I know what you're talking about. Yes, I know what you're talking about.
Once it was pointed out and that everyone realised that they were clearly covers to which additional markings had been added, and there was so much of it, we just didn't want to do anything with it. It was actually at the state level and not a national level.
Yeah.
And the state level, well, at least in the ACT, we don't have the rules that you have at national level, but we generally abide by the national rules and the FIP guidelines, etc. But once it became obvious, it was just so obvious, it wasn't a case for asking for a certificate. It covered, I don't know, half the material in the exhibit. I don't know, it was an awful lot. And very sad where someone had got hold of some original postal.
Ruined it all.
Some beautiful covers ruined with these impossible markings.
So I got one question for you, Jeff. So the expert group has looked at an item in traditional, and it might be a stamp or something, and you think this is forgery, so possible forgery, so either a certificate or don't show it. If the certificate then says it is a forgery, are you able to put it in and describe it as a forgery as an example of forgeries in your exhibit to tell the story?
Sure, absolutely. No, you can certainly, I've got no difficulty with that at all.
Yeah. So showing forgeries is not an issue as long as you describe it as forgeries.
I don't think it's recommended to show too many because they're forgeries. But sometimes they can be quite interesting, obviously.
Well, some forgeries are more expensive than the real thing.
Absolutely, that's absolutely true. Another thing I would mention is that another trend is to ask people to get up-to-date certificates. Sometimes someone will show a certificate with an item with a certificate from 1960 or something. With the current technology of expertising experts and groups, often a re-evaluation will find that it's not quite as good as they thought it was in 1960. So that is starting to become more and more common, that an expert team may ask that an up-to-date certificate be got for certain major items.
Hey, my question, Jeff, is what is a bona fide body to issue a certificate? How are they registered or accepted?
The FIP actually many years ago produced a list of acceptable experts. Anyone who's a member of the AIEP, International Expertising Group, is acceptable. And also the major expertising committees of the various countries.
So how does an expertising committee of a country get certified with FIP to issue certificates that are acceptable?
I think you'll find that they will be probably a member of the AIEP anyway, most of the time, and they can certainly apply. I mean, the Royal of New Zealand Expert Committee is certainly...
Yeah, but if somebody wanted to set up something in competition to the Royal, can they set something? Can there be another independent group of people?
Anyone can set themselves up as an expert. It's a question of whether the collecting population will accept them. It's a difficult question to answer, but I think
this seems a bit like an old boys club to me.
That's true to some extent, perhaps. Yes. Yes.
We've certainly had an example I can give you, Jeff, where in the astrophilately class, the person who asked for things to be expertised offered to do so for an exorbitant amount themselves.
There you go.
So
yes.
was not right.
That's not on. No, I agree with that.
So, Glenn, and say Nicaragua, are there expert type committees in that country?
Well, look, we have a study group with 54 people that specialise in Nicaraguan, and we can give a certificate because we're members of the American, I've forgotten what it was. However, most of my certificates were done through the Royal of London with a guy called the late Brian Morehouse, who was quite recognisable as a Central and South American expert. So so at the moment, if Jeff finds something else in Nicaragua that I could send it to the Royal of London, but they'll probably scratch their heads thinking, well, we don't know who should look at this. So I would get my study group to look at it and then see what certificate I can get from them. But yeah, that is a difficult one because in Nicaragua, the reason we collect Nicaraguan is it's understudied. And we spend a lot of time studying. So we're still learning as we're going along. So one thing we think is a forgery 1 minute, we find it out is to be real. And something that we've always thought to be real ends up being a forgery. So, and these days, the biggest problem is Nicaraguan has a lot of overprinted stamps, and overprints are the easiest things to forge and sometimes the hardest things to detect. But I think with newer technology, our guys, because we've got a few medical scientists who have microscopes and a whole range of ways of testing inks, etc., that can give us a fair indication. But yeah, it is a tough one.
Taking your point, Denise, I think it is fair to say that the operation of the expert team this has been going on at FIP exhibitions since the late 1990s. And the operation of the expert team at these exhibitions has been a bit of a boom to the expert committees. I mean, the average at an FIP exhibition, the average number of items that are taken out of the frames by an expert team is around 45 to 55. It's probably going to go because the length of international exhibitions has been shortened by a day or two, generally speaking, these days. There won't be enough time to do that many in the future because the work of the expert team is very paperwork heavy. Takes quite a few hours to get all the paperwork together and signed off and everything.
Yeah.
I think the new jurors here just need to be aware that if they're then asked to be commissioners, that this is a task that you can be called up to do.
Yeah, often
and to bear it in mind so it doesn't, you're not caught out when you're away somewhere that you have to called in to do something that you weren't planning on.
Yeah, often a new commissioner gets a bit of a shock when they find out that you go into the commissioner's room and you call out the country and they wonder what's going on.
Yeah. I was in New Zealand for Auckland. I mean, I realised I'd have to, but we had about 15 to do. And
the local national commissioner always cops a fair few, obviously.
And I think when you first go into a commission's room, Denise, the Commissioner General will outline what the schedule is. And one of those schedules is commissioners to be in that room for the expert group to come in and then call out the country. Typically, that's what they do, and because Australia's on top, so often we sweat first. And if it gets down to Brazil, we know we're off the hook, and New Zealand has to wait to almost the bottom of the line. But that's pretty much how it goes. But there's a roll call for all commissioners to be there for when the expert group comes in and says which ones have to be there. So it's not a holiday being a commissioner.